All right, Aristotle. Aristotle was OG when it comes to empiricism. Um, he was a student under Plato for 20 years, shows up at the academy when he's 18, and then hangs out with Plato for the next couple of decades, teaches himself. He becomes a teacher at the academy, and was particularly interested in what's termed natural philosophy, right? So folks back then didn't have the concept of science. So people who were interested in biology, or people who were interested in things like botany, or as Aristotle was, marine biology, studying the different aspects of the natural world, and particularly as Aristotle did, sort of categorizing all the different features of the natural world. That was termed studying natural philosophy. Aristotle was called away by the king of Macedonia to tutor his son, Alexander, who would go on to become Alexander the Great. And after Plato died, Aristotle kind of tooled around the region, in particular studying marine biology, and then wound up back in Athens and started his own kind of academy called the Lyceum, his own kind of school to teach folks. Now, you'd think that after hanging out for 2 decades with Plato and studying under Plato, that Aristotle would become a kind of mini-me, right? That he would become, not, if not a carbon copy, at least someone who held a lot of the fundamental ideas and principles that Plato did. I mean, after all, they're buds, right? And that's not the case. In fact, when it comes to their understandings of the structure of reality and what exists and how things exist, they couldn't be more different. So it's kind of interesting that you see somebody study under one person for decades and yet come to totally different conclusions about the nature of the world we live in and how to gain knowledge about it. All right, so I'll quickly kind of explain what some of those differences are. So remember Plato, through the kind of, with Socrates acting as his mouthpiece, has this concept of reality that's kind of dual, right? So reality, according to Plato, Socrates, is dual in its nature. You have this sort of physical material world that you and I inhabit, where we see, things like people and vases and mountain ranges and trees and flowers. And then we even see sort of representations of those things with like photographs or paintings. And this is all this sort of physical world of appearance. But Plato asserted that there's an entirely other world in addition and separate from this material world. And that's this non-material realm, this in what he would term the intelligible realm. And this is the world where ideas exist. This is the world where these pure, perfect forms of concepts that we have exist. And when I say exist, for Plato, they were features of reality. So Plato had this idea that in this intelligible, non-material realm, there existed some pure, perfect form of beauty that we then have the mental experience of with our intellect, right? And that we then might go out into the material, physical world and identify things that we think possess some degree of this quality called beauty. But what was important for Plato is that these worlds were completely distinct from one another. And so you think back to the lectures before when we talked about this idea that, well, for Plato, there would be this sort of perfect idea of catness. And then there would be representations of catness in the form of little kitty cats here in the material world. And we know that all of those little kitty cats are imperfect, right? Because they haven't always existed. At some point, they won't exist anymore. Everything's got a flaw. And that's kind of the nature of the material world for Plato. The perfect world, the place that is, the realm that is even more real than this world of appearances, is this non-material world that we can access with our intellect. Now, Aristotle comes along and he looks at this, or for 2 decades is looking at Plato and his depiction of the nature of reality, and he's just not buying it. He just doesn't think that it works. And so for Aristotle, he looks at Plato's ideas of forms, and he's like, wait a minute, dude, 2 worlds? 2 worlds. This world of the forms, and then this material world, where the representations of these forms exist. It's like, this has real problems for Aristotle. If the forms are the most real, if those are the essences of the things, how can they exist separate from the things themselves, right? If catness, if the pure perfect idea of catness is the most real aspect of cat, how can that exist in a separate world from little physical kitty cats? That doesn't seem to make sense. How do things in totally different worlds have any kind of relationship with one another? And if those forms are the things that are the most real and from which all the things in our material emanate, right? If they cause these things to exist, again, how can something in one world cause something in another world to exist if it's not also first existing in that world where this thing is being caused to exist? So this concept of two worlds was really not working for Aristotle. And you can kind of see this fundamental divide in their conceptions of reality in this depiction of the two of them. Here we have Plato on the left, and we have Aristotle on the right, or at least my right. And you can see that Plato's got his finger pointed to the sky, and Aristotle's got his hand kind of held over the earth. And that's gonna perfectly symbolize how Aristotle's metaphysics and how his conceptions of how we acquire knowledge are fundamentally different from Plato's. Plato is all about in the sky, in the clouds, right? Socrates is sort of mocked because he's thought to have his head kind of in the clouds in the sky. And Plato kind of is thought to, he's most concerned with this intelligible realm that's not of the earth, not of the material world. But Aristotle's going to come up with a metaphysics and an epistemology that is very much rooted on the ground, very much tied to our sense experiences of the things that we experience in the material world. So in the next video, we'll see exactly how he does that.